My name is Susan Dowse, and I'm the Socioeconomic Assessment Lead with EnergyAlberta. The purpose of this session is to provide information about the process for assessing potential community impacts related to the proposed Peace River nuclear power project. This presentation will cover three key topics. Firstly, how do we assess community impacts? What's the process we're embarking on? Secondly, what are the key topics related to economy, social factors, and community health that we'll be looking at? And thirdly, what are the detailed studies that we'll be undertaking over the next 1 to 2 years that will provide more detailed information? We are early in the process, so sessions like today help to explore key local issues and interests so that the studies can address them. With that in mind, we'll come back to the discussion questions on the right-hand side of this slide at the end of the presentation. These next few slides are about process. As part of the regulatory planning for this project, we are required to do a socioeconomic assessment. What is that? A socioeconomic assessment covers the potential social, economic, and health impacts. It tries to answer the big question of how will this project change the way people live, work, and enjoy life here. And our priority will be focusing on topics that are valued to the community. We call them valued components. And our approach is based on some key principles. Firstly, it's balanced. We want to maximize the potential benefits of the project while minimizing the potential for negative or adverse effects. We'll be looking across all phases of the project to understand how impacts may play out, from construction to operations to decommissioning. And the approach is community-driven. The input we get at the local level will shape the areas that we study and the mitigation and enhancement plans that are being developed. The goal here today is to learn what matters to you so it can be addressed in the studies. Examining potential impacts to how people work and live involves looking at a range of factors in a connected way. The assessment will look at the direct presence of the project, such as its land footprint, construction and operations activities, traffic, and the presence of workers. And then it asks how the project activities could interact with the natural environment and the people in the surrounding area and region. While there's a separate presentation today on the environmental effects and studies, it's important to note that many factors are interconnected. For example, in any project, potential changes to water could affect fish, which could in turn affect fishing, which could affect food consumption or recreation or livelihoods, which in turn could affect way of life or health. That's just a conceptual example, but it illustrates an important idea that different elements of the natural and human environment interconnect. The assessment team will study these factors together because they affect each other. And it's also important to note that we'll aim to consider how different groups within the larger population may experience impacts differently. We'll discuss more on these topics in the coming slides. Let's take a closer look at the impact assessment process. This is the structured approach we follow to understand and address the potential impacts of the project. It all starts with the project description, or the details of the project. And then it moves into what we call scoping, which is where we think about the study area and the key topics and what matters most to the community. And then we move into understanding baseline or current conditions. We collect information about existing community services, population, economy, and health to understand what's already there before the development begins. From there, we move into assessing potential effects. We analyze how the project might affect baseline conditions, both positively or negatively. And from there, we identify ways to reduce those negative impacts and enhance the positive ones. This may include design changes, protective measures, accommodation measures, or community benefits. Even after mitigation, some effects may remain, and we evaluate their significance and identify ways that they can be monitored as the project progresses. In the end, we are preparing an impact statement report, and all the findings from across all the disciplines are compiled into a comprehensive report that is submitted to the regulator, which then informs the public and decision makers. This process is designed to be transparent, inclusive, and science and inquiry based. And it's important to note on this diagram that we are early in the process. We are really in the scoping phase, understanding what's important, and embarking in the early stages of baseline data collection. We're now moving into the discussion of the various community impact topics that will be examined. A key part of the assessment is looking at economic effects with a focus on understanding and supporting benefits and opportunities from the project. The analysis of economic effects includes, for example, estimates of jobs and associated income, training and education opportunities, and business supply opportunities. The project would be a major capital investment in Alberta and would be expected to drive notable economic opportunities in the region and across Canada. Economic benefits of a multi-reactor nuclear project similar in size to what is being proposed in Peace River have been estimated to include thousands of jobs across Canada, including direct jobs, as well as indirect jobs in the supply chain and induced jobs due to ripple effects of income and spending across the economy. So what could this mean for this region during active construction and operations? Early estimates of construction and commissioning phases indicate a workforce of up to 5,000 workers may be required, and that a full operations workforce of between 2,000 and 3,000 workers would be required, including indirect contractors. And beyond direct jobs at the plant, many additional positions would be required in the local community, for example, in retail, healthcare, housing, services, as workers and their families settle into the area. A key part of our work is completing a project-specific analysis to refine the workforce and jobs estimates based on design and technology decisions. This will also analyze project-specific benefits broken down by province and region. More about jobs and training and procurement will be discussed in the employment training and procurement presentation today. Our approach going forward in this area includes several things. We'll be working to understand the capacity and interest of the local workforce and businesses. We'll be refining and sharing information about the required jobs and skills to complete the project. We'll identify ways to support training and readiness, and we'll be developing the project-specific economic effects study. Next, we'll discuss social impacts. Social impacts refers to other facets of community life that could be affected. A key aspect is population dynamics. Connected to the requirement for workers to build and operate the plant, the assessment will estimate the number of people moving or returning to the area, including potentially their families. This evaluates the capacity of the local and regional labor market in comparison to the workforce needs of the project. Related to population growth, then, the assessment would also consider and look at potential impacts on housing and services and infrastructure in the region, such as healthcare, social services, schools, and emergency services. Related to immediate project needs as well as general population and migration, the assessment will also look at transportation infrastructure, such as roads and access ways, due to the anticipated movement of materials and workers to and from the site and through the region. We'll also examine waste management infrastructure to identify capacity constraints and needs related to routine non-radioactive waste. We'll also look at the compatibility of the project with local land use plans and goals and nearby land uses. We understand that this may have a link to economic impacts as well. We'll consider how resource-based livelihoods such as agriculture or recreation could be affected. And we'll also look to understand other unique aspects of the community way of life, such as patterns of community safety, connection, and any unique community assets that might be affected. Our approach as we do this work will involve working with government service providers to understand existing capacity, constraints, and plans of services and infrastructure development. We will work to explore areas of collaboration to support community aspirations. How could this project play a role in helping the communities achieve their goals? And we'll collaborate to provide project scenarios that can be built into public service planning. Community health is a key part of the assessment. When assessing community health and well-being, the whole picture is looked at, including potential changes to both the environmental and socioeconomic factors that affect well-being. On the environmental side, we'll conduct what's called a human health risk assessment. That means specialist study is undertaken that carefully calculates potential contaminant exposures through air, water, or soil, and make sure that the right safeguards are in place to protect safety. We'll also use the information that has been collected on the economic and social studies. We recognize, and experience has told us elsewhere, that other determinants of health include social and economic factors such as jobs and income, healthcare access, social support, food security, and individual behaviors and characteristics, including perceptions of risk. The health impact assessment will consider all the various factors that influence health outcomes. The human health risk assessment outcomes and the information from the socioeconomic studies are brought together to look at all the way health outcomes could be influenced. And by considering these factors together, we'll work to identify both the risks and the potential benefits and recommend measures to enhance and protect health and well-being for the community. An important part of this assessment is recognizing and respecting the unique rights of Indigenous peoples. This means acknowledging, identifying, and protecting cultural heritage and sites of Indigenous significance, as well as ensuring that traditional land and resource use that could be impacted by the project is understood and respected. We'll also be looking closely at the health, social, and economic conditions of Indigenous communities because these can be affected in different ways than the broader population. And throughout, we are guided by the rights of Indigenous people, which are recognized in law and international frameworks. This means listening carefully, engaging meaningfully, and ensuring that Indigenous voices help shape the process and outcomes. So where do we go from here? Research will continue over the next 12 to 18 months or so to develop baseline information and identify project-specific effects. Some of the key detailed studies are noted on this slide. We've discussed the health-related studies already. With respect to working with Indigenous peoples, we'll be undertaking work in the area of cultural heritage resources, as well as traditional land and resource use studies, as well as Indigenous community profiles on economic and social and health information, as well as Indigenous community health assessments and rights and interests evaluations. From an economic standpoint, we'll be doing a labor supply and demand analysis, as well as a training and education program scan, a business registry and capacity review, and a project-specific economic effect study. We'll be working with local communities also to develop community profiles on baseline economic, social, and health conditions. We anticipate developing a housing and infrastructure study, as well as a transportation study. And through this process, engagement will be ongoing. We'll be engaging with local government, service providers, and Indigenous groups. We'll be exploring collaboration on information collection and solutions. And we'll be working to understand unique impacts that may be experienced by different groups of people in the broader population. We'd love to hear more about what matters to you. Are there economic aspects we haven't considered? What aspects of community life are most important to consider and foster from your perspective? And what health issues should we pay special attention to?